I used to believe that giving my daughter everything I could afford made me a good mother. I didn't grow up with much, and I promised myself that my child would never feel left out or less than anyone else. Whenever she wanted something, I found a way to make it happen, even if it meant working late, skipping rest, or putting my own needs last. I told myself that love meant sacrifice, and I wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor. At first, it felt good. Seeing her smile when she opened a gift made all the stress feel worth it. I felt proud that I could provide what I never had. I liked thinking of myself as understanding and modern, not strict or cold. I didn't want to be the kind of parent who said no too often. I wanted her to feel safe, comfortable, and confident. But over time, something started to feel off. The thank yous became rare. The excitement faded faster each time. What once felt like joy slowly turned into expectation. If something didn't arrive on time or wasn't exactly what she wanted, the mood in the house changed. Small comments slipped out, sharp words, impatient sighs, looks that made me feel like I was failing even when I was trying my hardest. I told myself it was normal. I said she was just growing up. Everyone told me teenagers are difficult, so I pushed my doubts aside. I didn't want to admit that my efforts weren't bringing us closer. I kept giving more, hoping it would fix the distance I felt between us. The moment that changed everything was small and quiet. No yelling. No big fight. Just a simple situation that should not have mattered as much as it did. I remember standing there, listening, realizing that the way she spoke to me wasn't frustration or stress. It was something else. It was confidence, confidence that I would always give in, always fix things, always pay the price while she moved on without a second thought. That was when it hit me. I wasn't being appreciated. I was being used. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, everyday way that drained me without me noticing. I had confused love with giving and respect with silence. I had been so focused on being a good mom that I forgot to be a strong one. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't cry or argue. I just stood there, feeling something inside me shift. For the first time, I questioned everything I thought I was doing right. I wondered when love turned into obligation and when kindness turned into weakness. That quiet realization hurt more than any argument ever could, because it forced me to see the truth I had been avoiding for a long time. Alyssa had always been confident. She spoke her mind without hesitation and never doubted herself, even when she was wrong. People often said she was mature for her age, but at home that confidence came out sharp and cold. She knew how to cut with words, especially when she was unhappy. Madison noticed it, even though she tried not to react to it. No matter how much Madison gave, it never seemed to be enough. New things quickly became old things. What once made Alyssa excited became something she expected as a right. When Madison hesitated or said maybe later, Alyssa would compare her to other mothers. She would mention how someone else's mom was more fun, more understanding, more generous. Each comparison landed quietly but painfully, leaving Madison feeling like she was always falling short. The respect Madison hoped for never came. Alyssa rarely said thank you. Conversations felt one-sided. Eye rolls replaced smiles. Short answers replaced real talks. Madison felt the distance growing but told herself not to take it personally. She blamed school stress, age, and changing moods. She reminded herself that teenagers go through phases and that patience was part of parenting. Deep down, Madison knew something wasn't right. The tone Alyssa used wasn't just teenage frustration, it was dismissive. But Madison was afraid to address it. She didn't want to be labeled as controlling or harsh. She feared that setting limits would push her daughter even further away. So she stayed quiet and kept giving, hoping kindness would soften the edges. Over time, Madison stopped checking in with herself. She ignored how tired she felt and how small she was beginning to feel in her own home. Her needs became unimportant. Her voice became softer. She adjusted her behavior to avoid conflict, even when it meant swallowing hurt feelings. She told herself that being a good mother meant putting her child first, no matter the cost. What Madison didn't realize was that her silence was teaching Alyssa something. It taught her that respect was optional. It taught her that love meant unlimited access without responsibility. Madison's efforts, meant to protect her daughter, slowly erased her own place in the relationship. The house no longer felt warm. It felt tense, like Madison was always walking carefully, afraid of saying the wrong thing. She smiled through discomfort and nodded through disrespect. She convinced herself that this was temporary, that things would improve if she just held on a little longer. But the more Madison ignored the signs, the clearer they became. Her blind love wasn't strengthening their bond, it was breaking it. And without realizing it, Madison was losing herself while trying to hold on to a version of motherhood that no longer existed. Ethan Brooks came into Madison's life when things already felt heavy. He was calm in ways she wasn't, steady where she felt unsure. He listened when she spoke and never raised his voice. After the chaos of long workdays and emotional distance at home, Ethan felt like peace. Madison believed she had finally found someone she could lean on. Ethan didn't stay on the sidelines. He involved himself in daily life, helping with routines, offering advice, and stepping in when Madison felt too tired to argue. He treated Alyssa kindly at first, respectful and careful not to overstep. Madison appreciated that. It made her feel supported instead of alone. She trusted him because he seemed to care without demanding anything in return. Alyssa was polite around him in the beginning. She kept conversations light and neutral. But over time, the tone changed. Alyssa laughed louder when Ethan was around. She shared jokes Madison wasn't part of. She seemed more relaxed with him than with her own mother. Madison noticed how Alyssa's mood shifted whenever Ethan entered the room. During small disagreements, Alyssa started defending Ethan without being asked. If Madison questioned something, Alyssa would jump in, explaining his intentions, softening his words, or turning the focus back on Madison. It happened quietly, often wrapped in calm sentences that made Madison look unreasonable for even feeling hurt. Madison felt a strange tension building. It wasn't obvious enough to confront, but it lingered. She noticed how conversations stopped when she walked in. She noticed how Alyssa looked to Ethan for approval instead of her. These moments made Madison uncomfortable, but she pushed the feeling aside. She told herself she was being sensitive. She reminded herself that trust was important. Ethan had never given her a reason to doubt him. He showed up when he said he would. He helped when things got hard. Madison didn't want to question someone who had been reliable. She didn't want to create problems where none existed. So she stayed quiet. She smiled and pretended not to notice when Alyssa drifted further from her. She ignored the tight feeling in her chest when she felt left out in her own home. Madison convinced herself that this closeness was a good thing, that it meant her daughter felt supported. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The balance in the house had shifted, and Madison was no longer at the center. She told herself it was normal, that families change. She trusted both of them enough to ignore the growing distance, unaware that her silence was allowing a deeper divide to form. That night started like any other. Madison finished her work late and came home tired, expecting quiet. The lights were low, and she could hear voices from the living room. She wasn't trying to listen. She was just walking past when she heard her name. Alyssa's voice was sharp and clear. There was no anger in it, only certainty. She laughed and said Madison was stupid for believing everything she was told. She said her mother tried too hard, that she was desperate to be liked, and that she was easy to control if you just knew what to say. Each word felt heavy, like it was meant to stay. Madison froze where she stood. Her body went cold, and her mind struggled to understand what she was hearing. This wasn't a teenager venting. This wasn't a bad mood. The tone was confident, almost proud. Alyssa wasn't complaining. She was explaining. Then Ethan spoke. Madison waited for him to stop it, to defend her, to say Alyssa was being unfair. Instead, he agreed. Calmly. Casually. He said Madison meant well but didn't see things clearly. He said she gave too much and asked for too little. He said it made life easier for everyone. That was the moment something broke inside her. Madison felt her chest tighten as the truth settled in. The kindness she thought came from love had been turned into a weakness. The patience she believed showed strength had been used against her. Everything she gave freely had taught them how to take without guilt. She didn't walk into the room. She didn't interrupt. She stood there quietly, listening to people she trusted talk about her like she wasn't real. Like she was an object, not a person. Every sacrifice she made replayed in her mind, now stripped of meaning. The pain wasn't loud. It was deep and steady. It wasn't just Alyssa's words that hurt, it was Ethan's agreement. His silence would have been bad enough, but his support of those words felt like a betrayal she couldn't explain away. Madison realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't immaturity. It was a shared belief that she existed to provide, to smooth things over, and to stay quiet. The home she worked so hard to protect no longer felt safe. She walked away slowly and closed herself into her room. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear in a way it hadn't been before. She finally understood that love without boundaries doesn't bring closeness. It invites control. That night, Madison didn't cry right away. She sat in silence, replaying every moment she ignored, every feeling she dismissed. She saw the pattern clearly for the first time. This wasn't just hurtful behavior. It was betrayal rooted deep inside her own home, and she knew nothing would ever be the same again. After that night, Madison couldn't stop thinking. Her mind kept returning to every moment she had brushed aside, every time she had chosen comfort over questions. She didn't confront anyone. Instead, she paid attention. She watched closely, quietly, for the first time. What she noticed changed the way she saw everything. The phones she had bought over the years were no longer just gifts in her memory. They were tools. Alyssa guarded them carefully, never leaving them unattended, always tense when Madison was near. Madison realized how often excuses had been made to protect what was on those screens. Lies had come easily. Stories had been shaped to keep Madison in the dark. Madison began to understand that the phones weren't symbols of love to her daughter. They were leverage. They gave Alyssa control, privacy without trust, and freedom without accountability. Madison felt a wave of shame as she accepted her role in it. She hadn't just given gifts. She had taught her daughter that affection could be bought and replaced. The deeper Madison looked, the worse it felt. She noticed spending patterns that didn't make sense. Purchases she didn't remember agreeing to. Decisions that felt rushed, guided by pressure rather than need. When she thought back, she remembered conversations where Ethan and Alyssa had been unusually aligned. They would suggest upgrades, replacements, or necessary expenses together, calmly steering her toward choices she hadn't planned to make. It became clear they had been influencing her as a team. Madison felt humiliated, not because of the money, but because of how easily she had been guided. She trusted them both. She believed they had her best interests at heart. Instead, they had learned exactly how to push her, when to flatter, when to complain, and when to stay silent until she gave in. The betrayal felt heavier now because it was intentional. It wasn't careless behavior. It was coordinated. They had watched her work herself thin and decided to take advantage of it. Madison saw how often she had been made to feel guilty for hesitating, how quickly she was reminded of being a good mom whenever she questioned spending. She finally admitted the truth to herself. She had confused generosity with love and access with trust. In trying to protect her daughter from struggle, she had removed responsibility from the picture entirely. That realization hurt in a quiet, lasting way. Madison didn't feel angry yet. She felt exposed. Like someone had walked through her life and taken notes while she wasn't looking. Every sacrifice now carried a different meaning, and it made her stomach turn. She sat alone with that truth, understanding that this wasn't just about money or phones. It was about control, learned behavior, and the cost of never saying no. For the first time, Madison stopped blaming herself emotionally and started seeing the situation clearly. She wasn't failing as a mother. She had been manipulated by the people she trusted most. And now that she could see it, she knew things couldn't continue the same way. Madison didn't confront them. She didn't raise her voice or demand answers. After everything she had realized, anger felt useless. She knew that reacting too fast would only give them a chance to twist the story. So she chose silence. She stopped spending without thinking. No more quick approvals. No more sudden upgrades or extra purchases. When suggestions came, she said she would think about it. She didn't explain herself or justify her choices. She simply paused. That small change was noticed immediately. Madison also stopped over-explaining her feelings. She no longer tried to earn understanding or soften her words. If something didn't feel right, she kept it to herself. She stopped begging for warmth, attention, or respect. She let the space grow, even when it felt uncomfortable. Instead of reacting, she observed. She listened carefully to conversations, noticing patterns she had once ignored. She paid attention to tone, timing, and shared looks. She began writing things down, not out of anger, but for clarity. Dates, behaviors, decisions. It helped her separate facts from emotions. With every quiet observation, Madison felt herself changing. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She wasn't trying to fix anything anymore. She was trying to understand it fully. Emotionally, she stepped back. She stopped expecting gratitude and stopped hoping for sudden change. That distance protected her. It allowed her to think clearly without constantly feeling hurt. She realized how often her reactions had been used against her in the past. The house felt different now. The energy shifted. The less Madison reacted, the more unsettled things became around her. She noticed impatience grow when she didn't give immediate answers. Confusion appeared when she didn't explain herself. Madison understood something important during that time. Revenge didn't need noise. It didn't need confrontation or drama. It needed patience and control. By staying calm, she was no longer predictable. That made her powerful. She wasn't planning harm. She was planning protection. She was reclaiming her role, her space, and her sense of self. Each quiet day helped her feel stronger and more grounded. Madison no longer felt like a wounded mother trying to be loved. She felt like a survivor who had learned the rules of the situation and decided to stop playing by them. She knew the silence wouldn't last forever. Eventually, things would come to a head. But for now, staying quiet gave her time, and time was the one thing she finally understood the value of. The moment came without warning, but Madison knew right away that it was different. What started as a serious conversation turned into something heavier, something that couldn't be undone. For once, Madison spoke honestly about how tired she felt and how overwhelmed everything had become. She didn't accuse anyone. She didn't raise her voice. She only asked for understanding. Ethan responded calmly, but his words were firm. He focused on how the situation affected him, how the changes made him uncomfortable, how things felt unfair to him. Madison listened, hoping Alyssa would step in, hoping her daughter would see how much this conversation was costing her emotionally. Instead, Alyssa sided with Ethan. She defended him openly, saying Madison was overreacting. She said things had been fine before and didn't understand why her mother was making problems now. She spoke about Ethan's feelings with care, while dismissing her mother's pain as stress or exaggeration. Madison felt something settle in her chest. It wasn't shock. It was clarity. In that moment, she understood the truth she had been avoiding. Alyssa didn't see her as a parent anymore. She saw her as a source. Someone who provided comfort, money, and stability, but not someone whose emotions mattered. Madison's role had been reduced to what she could give, not who she was. The realization hurt deeply, but it also ended the confusion. There was no more wondering if she was imagining things. No more hoping for balance. The loyalty she expected as a mother wasn't there. Madison didn't argue back. She didn't defend herself. She simply listened until the conversation ended. When it was over, she went to her room and closed the door. She sat alone in the quiet, thinking about every choice she had made since becoming a mother. That night, Madison made a decision she had never allowed herself to make before. She chose herself. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Out of necessity. She realized that continuing the same way would only erase her completely. Loving her daughter didn't mean disappearing. Being a mother didn't mean accepting disrespect or emotional harm. Madison understood that things would change after that night. The path ahead would be difficult, and it would come with guilt and fear. But for the first time, she felt sure. She lay awake, calm and clear-headed, knowing she had reached the point where survival required action. And in choosing herself, Madison didn't feel selfish. She felt free. Madison moved carefully after that night. She didn't announce her decisions or explain them in long conversations. She acted with calm purpose. The first thing she did was take back control of her home. She reviewed everything she was responsible for and removed what no longer made sense. Ethan was the first change. Madison ended the relationship without drama. There were no long arguments or emotional speeches. She told him clearly that the arrangement no longer worked and that he needed to leave. She stayed firm even when he tried to reason with her. Her tone was steady, not angry. That firmness made it final. Once he was gone, the house felt quieter, but not empty. Madison could breathe again. She didn't rush to fill the silence. She allowed it to exist. Next, she addressed the financial excess. She set clear limits and stuck to them. No unnecessary spending. No last-minute demands. No emotional pressure influencing decisions. Every expense now had a reason, and every decision had a boundary. Alyssa noticed immediately. Requests were met with calm refusals or delayed answers. There were no arguments, just consistency. Madison didn't take things away out of spite. She simply stopped providing more than what was reasonable. Privileges became responsibilities. Access came with rules. Alyssa struggled with the change. Frustration showed in her tone and behavior. She tested limits, expecting them to bend like before. But they didn't. Madison stayed steady, refusing to engage in emotional battles. This wasn't punishment. It was reality. Madison wasn't trying to hurt her daughter. She was teaching her something she had avoided teaching before. That independence comes with limits. That respect is not optional. That love doesn't mean unlimited access. For the first time, Alyssa had to adjust without instant comfort. She had to sit with disappointment. She had to manage without control. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Madison felt no joy in watching the struggle. But she also felt no guilt. She understood that growth often feels unfair to those who benefited from imbalance. The revenge was quiet because it wasn't fueled by anger. It was fueled by clarity. By removing excess, Madison removed manipulation. By setting boundaries, she reclaimed her role. The people who once relied on her generosity now had to rely on themselves. And in that shift, Madison finally felt grounded in her own life again. Once Madison set boundaries, the changes became clear very quickly. Ethan was the first to leave. Without the comfort and convenience he had taken for granted, he disappeared. There were no arguments, no fights, just absence. Madison didn't chase him. She didn't need to. The arrangement that had given him privilege was gone, and so was he. His departure left the house quieter, more orderly, and fully under her control. Alyssa's adjustment was slower but more revealing. The world she had grown used to, filled with immediate gratification and constant indulgence, was suddenly different. The rules Madison had set felt strict at first. She didn't get what she wanted when she wanted it. She had to wait, compromise, and face limits for the first time. Her frustration was visible, in sighs, in impatience, in small arguments. She tested boundaries, hoping Madison would give in. But Madison didn't. The lessons she had avoided teaching were now unavoidable. Watching from a distance, Madison felt neither triumph nor resentment. She felt clarity. She could see cause and effect in their actions. Ethan had left because he only valued what he could take. Alyssa struggled because she had been conditioned to expect without responsibility. The consequences were natural, not invented. Madison's role was simply to hold the line. For Madison, the emotional cost of betrayal had been high. She had loved, trusted, and given more than she should have. But in facing the reality of her daughter's and Ethan's behavior, she found freedom. She no longer felt manipulated or drained. The illusions that once blinded her were gone, replaced with understanding and certainty. Her heart ached for Alyssa, but she also knew that real growth often comes through discomfort. The daughter she had tried to protect from life's lessons was now learning them in a way Madison could not soften. And that was necessary. Love wasn't about removing challenges, it was about letting someone face the truth, even if it hurt. Madison also recognized her own transformation. She no longer measured her worth by others' approval. She no longer tied love to material giving or emotional sacrifice. She had learned the limits of patience, generosity, and trust. In the house, life settled into a new rhythm. Ethan was gone. Alyssa was adjusting. And Madison moved through each day with a quiet strength she hadn't known before. She understood that every action had consequences, and every relationship reflected the choices of the people involved. She could no longer control them, but she could control herself. This realization brought peace. She could observe, guide, and enforce boundaries without losing herself. Everyone was now living with the results of their own decisions. Madison didn't need to punish or force growth. She simply held firm, and the consequences fell naturally. That clarity was the reward, the proof that she had regained control over her life and her home. Madison sat quietly one evening, thinking about everything that had happened. The long years of giving, the small betrayals she had ignored, and the pain of realizing the people she loved most had taken advantage of her. She understood something clearly now: love without boundaries doesn't create closeness. It creates entitlement. She had spent years trying to earn gratitude through gifts and favors, but all she had received in return was disrespect and manipulation. For a long time, she had equated generosity with love, believing that if she gave enough, her daughter and Ethan would care in the ways she hoped. Now she knew better. True respect and affection couldn't be bought or forced. They had to be earned, and they had to be mutual. Madison realized that trying to fill every need for others while ignoring her own had left her vulnerable. She also realized that the betrayal hurt most because it came from people she trusted completely. Family should be the safe place, the people who support you unconditionally. When that trust was broken, the pain cut deeper than anything else. But instead of letting it destroy her, Madison chose to use it as a lesson. She would not let the hurt define her. She would reclaim her life and her self-worth. Madison started to rebuild herself. She set clear boundaries and made decisions based on what was right for her, not what others expected. She focused on her own growth, her emotional health, and her independence. Each day, she reminded herself that taking care of herself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Strength didn't come from bending to others' demands, it came from standing firm and protecting your own dignity. She also reflected on the power of quiet action. Revenge didn't need to be loud or aggressive. It could be simple: removing what harms you, refusing to participate in manipulation, and living according to your own rules. Madison had done that, and in doing so, she had regained control of her life. Looking back, she could see how far she had come. The fear, the exhaustion, and the constant anxiety had been replaced with confidence and clarity. She had learned to recognize manipulation, to value her own needs, and to enforce limits without guilt. She felt proud of herself for surviving and for turning a painful experience into a source of strength. In the end, Madison understood the most important lesson: Being betrayed by those you love hurts deeply, but reclaiming your self-worth is the strongest form of revenge. She no longer sought approval or affection through gifts or sacrifices. Instead, she lived with dignity, self-respect, and quiet strength. That, she realized, was true empowerment.